Our call to confession this morning comes from the first letter to the Corinthians. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat this morning. First letter to the Corinthians, chapter 6, verses 5 and 6, which says, I say this to your shame. Is it so that there is not among you one wise man who will be able to decide between his brethren? But brother goes to law with brother, and that before unbelievers. So we're continuing to look at the eighth commandment in our time of confession. And as we do so, it's helpful to remember that the command, you shall not steal, has much greater implications than that. As the Shorter Catechism tells us, not stealing also means the lawful procuring and furthering the wealth and outward estate of ourselves and others. As Christians, we are to be furthering our own worldly state as well as that of our neighbor. This becomes important when it comes to today's phrase from the larger catechism, question 141. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to remind you that the duties required in the eighth commandment are a whole bunch of things. And today's phrase is avoiding unnecessary lawsuits. The proof text is from 1 Corinthians 6, which I just read, about Christians taking other Christians to civil court over a dispute, and that before unbelieving judges. Our text from 1 Corinthians 6 mentions the shame of taking a brother to court. If we were to look at the entire passage, 1 Corinthians 6, verses 1 through 8, we'd see that there is a progression in the shame that is being pronounced. It is shameful to go to court before the unrighteous. That's verse 1. Since Christians will someday judge the entire world, verse 2, and angels, verse 3, it is shameful to think that there are not wise enough men in the church to be judges over our worldly affairs, verse 4. It is shameful for a Christian brother to take another brother to court, verse 7, rather than settling the dispute between themselves. It is shameful for a Christian to defraud a Christian brother, verse 8. Or really, it's shameful to defraud anyone else for that matter. This entire paragraph is about dealings within the church, a Christian brother interacting with another Christian. In the first place, it implies that there are to be courts of wise men within the church. And having said that, I can see our elders shaking in their boots at the thought of having to all of a sudden make these kind of decisions as well as everything else they do. Just what they need. They need me to give them more to do. But that was answered in Exodus 18 when Moses' father-in-law Jethro advised him to appoint other wise men as judges for the constant disputes among the people of Israel. Secondly, the larger catechism speaks of unnecessary lawsuits. This does not mean that it is unlawful to use the legal system. Paul certainly used it whenever he could. For instance, it is not unlawful for a Christian to take a non-believer to court if they have been defrauded, as when a customer fails to pay for work done on their house. And we certainly have had that instance within this congregation. But it does mean that when there are financial disputes among Christians, we should be settling them between ourselves. Now, this may seem like this is not a thing with which we'll really have to worry, a Christian brother suing another Christian brother. The fact that Moses was deciding cases like these from the moment that Israel escaped bondage from Egypt, and the fact that Paul had to instruct the young church in Corinth about financial dealings tells you that it is only a matter of time until the church, our church, has to deal with internal financial disputes again. And we have to remember the principle that we are to be advancing our brother's outward worldly estate at the same time as we advance our own. That means you don't forget to pay. That means you don't forget to pay a brother when they do work for you. That means you don't expect the Christian discount from a brother. Instead, you should be paying them a Christian bonus. That means you don't expect free labor and advice from a Christian accountant in the congregation because they happen to have expertise in that area. They may offer it to you for free, but that doesn't mean you should expect it. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 6 that it is to our shame because sin is possible in all of these areas. We can sin in allowing our cases to be decided by unrighteous men, especially when there is a dispute between us. We can sin by not reconciling with each other. Remember that Jesus tells us in the Sermon on the Mount, if you remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering at the altar and first be reconciled to your brother. And most importantly, we can sin by defrauding our brothers. This reminds us of our sin of relying on unbelievers to decide our internal affairs, and our sin of defrauding others, and all of our other sin. We must confess our sin to a righteous and holy God in order to worship him rightly. I therefore invite you to kneel with me as you are able, confessing your sin privately and then corporately reciting the prayer in the bulletin.